The story began when the Demon King's military appeared and spread across the continent, invading the lands of the human race. But our protagonist, Jilbajas, who was known by his human name, Alec, was more occupied with playing hide and seek at the time. He was raised in a village where the worst emergency was when the library ran out of romance novels. Alec always thought good things were meant to last forever. However, nothing prepared him for what lies ahead. One day in the rural village of a small country called Ntr'd, someone calls out to Alec while he is still in bed. He'd been having an awesome time, floating in dreamland when his joystick got some heavy and warm sensation. Thinking his dreams are about to come true, he reaches out to grab his human alarm clock and opens his eyes to find Claire's lips a few inches away from his. When she asks if he's really awake, Alec realizes the impending disaster, so he suddenly escapes from Claire's dangerous straddling to prevent himself from busting a load. When he asks why she entered his room again without his invitation, Claire says she's got all the permission she needs from his mom since she's his childhood friend. Pissed at his mom, Alec gets off the bed trying to conceal his morning flagpole. He then asks Claire why she's in his room so early in the morning. In response, Claire suggests that they go steal some of her dad's honey jar since Alec wasn't bold enough to steal from hers. Surprised by her suggestion, Alec asks if stealing is one of her hobbies now, and Claire says history only remembers the rebels since nobody writes about the well-behaved. After this, Claire makes a cute face, making Alec realize how much of a sucker he is for good looks. Shortly after this, Bonnie and Clyde take their leave to constitute their planned mischief. When they arrive at Claire's house, which is the only bakery in the village, since her parents are aware of their friendship, it's a norm for them to visit each other's home without weird stares or questions. Just then, Claire finds the honey jar while Alec walks into the room after her. With the loot right before them, they both lit up like neon tubes on a Friday night. While they enjoy the honey, someone opens the door and asks if the honey is delicious. Unaware of the trouble they were in, they respond saying it's the best they've ever had. Just then, Cedric, Claire's father, laughs with an evil tone, making them realize that they're done for, so they apologize immediately and try to give reasons for their honey heist. However, Cedric's knuckle goes to work in their heads, so they flee the room with swollen heads. The mini-felons were quite familiar with Cedric's knuckles since they'd been scolded a handful of times. While Alec wonders if the deliciousness of the honey is worth the pain in his swollen head, his evil twin tells him a fun fact about the hair-removing applications of feather grass soup. She then suggests that they use it on the village chief, making Alec wonder how she gets her ideas. In order not to look like a buzzkill, he decides it's an interesting idea too. So they both went out to pick some red feather grass, while Claire's mom told them to be careful. Despite their popularity for being mischievous devils, Alec loves their peaceful and exciting lives in the village. So as they went off, the villagers bade them farewell and urged them to return safely. After a day of mischievous pranks, Alec decides it would be nice to spend more time having fun with Claire. Afterward, it gets late and Alec notices that the sun has been setting sooner than it usually does. While he thinks winter must be drawing near, he decides to hurry and return home. On his way, his attention gets drawn to some noise around a corner, so he goes on to check it out. On getting there, he sees a man who begs for his life but loses his head regardless. While Alec stays rooted to a spot, he wonders what is going on, and just then, the dismembered head rolls on the floor and stops before him. Shocked to see this, Alec turns around and calls for help, but when he peeps into a nearby window, he sees more bodies with blood splattered all over the place, so he collapses and wonders why everyone's dead. While he coughs and tries to get himself together, someone spots him and advises him to run. Just then, he asks the man about what's going on, and the man explains that the village is being attacked by the Demon King's army from the Dark Clan. While he tries to process the information, the man adds that the west side of the village has been wiped out by the attacks. When he hears this, Alec dashes in the direction of the west side of the village. When the man calls him, Alec refuses to return since his house and Claire's house is on the west side of the village. On his arrival, everywhere is on fire, so he looks ahead and spots some demons attacking some people. When he looks closer, he discovers Cedric's body surrounded by these demons. Just then, he spots the goblins trying to rip Claire apart while she screams. Suddenly, they rip off her dress while Alec watches and screams her name. Claire then sees Alec and asks him to save her from the goblins who are busy taking dips into her honey pot. Enraged by this, Alec picks up a garden fork thinking he's the king of Atlantis. Unknown to him, an arrow was aimed at him, So as he approached the goblins, the archer shot an arrow at him. But Jilbages' mother showed up just in time to save his skinny behind from getting hit. While they enjoy a short moment of reunion, Alec tells his mom that they have to rescue Claire, but she suddenly picks him up and flees the scene. While Alec protests and screams for his mother to return and save Claire, she tells him that he has to live. Despite being pierced by many arrows, Jilbages' mom flees the scene while he weeps and watches the Demon King's army taunt them and boasts of their ability to make life miserable for humans. This makes Alec cry his eyes out and vow to wipe out every Dark Clan member no matter what or how long it cost him. 20 years later, Alec has become stronger than he was, even though he's not very different from the army's mascot. He has now become a full-fledged hero and is hitching a ride on a dragon alongside his comrades. They plan to launch an attack on the demon's race headquarters, so one of his comrades calls out his name to be sure he's not dead long before the fight begins. The humans had put together a strategy to attack the Demon King's castle by hitching a ride on a dragon that deserted from the Demon King's army. Having had their fair share of the Dark Clan's oppression, they all volunteered to raid the castle since they were the only survivors who didn't fall into despair. While Alec thinks losing their lives in an attempt to stop the Demon King is a cheap price to pay, someone announces that he can see the Demon King's castle up ahead. So the commander tells his soldiers that it is time to rock and roll. Meanwhile, Jilbages, who has been dreaming about the moment, thinks it's time to end it for good. Suddenly, the white dragon crashes into the castle and the carnage begins. Surprised by the resistance they were met with, Alec and his comrades freaked out. Just then, they discovered they were in a face-off against the undead. Suddenly, a mage in the human army tells his comrades to get down and obliterates the army of the undead with light from his staff. Just when their morale was restored, the sage's head was suddenly sliced in half, shocking the human soldiers. Meanwhile, the Demon King's army reinforcements approached from afar, while the human army wet their pants. Shocked by the sudden arrival of reinforcement, Alec freezes, wondering how the reinforcements arrived so fast. Just then, his commander instructs him to go on while he buys him some time. When Alec tries to change his commander's mind, his commander insists that he leave. So Alec goes on to find the Demon King while the commander dashes towards the reinforcements alone. Shortly after this, Alec opens a door and hears a voice saying he's surprised anyone could make it that far. So he sees the Demon King sitting on his throne and asks if he's really the one. Suddenly, the Demon King hits the ground with his spear and gets on his feet to introduce himself as Golges Olgi. Just then, Alec draws his sword and charges towards Golges. However, as he approaches the Demon King, Alec feels a heavy presence around him, but charges on regardless, since backing down is not an option. Suddenly, he clashes swords with the Golges and feels like he really stands a chance, so he swings his sword to take Golges' head. However, to his surprise, the Demon King dodges the slash. When Alec backs off a little to work up his next attack, Golges smiles like the devil he is and disarms Alec in a single move. When Alec realizes what just happened, he suddenly gets a flash of Claire and screams out loud when Golges' spear pierces through him. In retaliation, he takes another swing at Golges, but Golges dodges this and laughs at him. Suddenly, Golges pulls out his spear and spins it around, preparing to finish what he started. Just then, Alec gets another flash, this time of Cedric, while Golges deals him multiple hits. While Alec bleeds from all the hits, Golges grabs him by the neck. Just then, it occurs to Alec that his life is flashing before his eyes. So Golges commends him for fighting like a scarecrow made of straws. While strangling Ales, Golges points out that his soul seems delicious, so he decides to make a nourishment out of Jilbages. Suddenly, Alec gets blown into a million pieces, and in his final moments, he realizes it's over since he couldn't avenge anyone. The last thing Alec sees is Golges standing over the remains of his body staring intensely at his remains. When everything goes dark, Alec sees Claire and thinks he's on his way to be with her. However, to his surprise, there was no golden city or angels with wings, but only the face of Golges saying he's got a really tough look despite being a baby. Confused as to what's happening, Alec thinks he didn't die and could still fight, so he reaches out but is surprised that the best he can do is wave his baby hands. Meanwhile, a woman nearby says he's a lively boy while Golges says he has many heirs to surpass. As Golges heads out, he realizes he hasn't named his son, so he names him Jilbages. Just then, his new mother cradles him and announces that he'll become the Demon King. Suddenly, Jilbages realizes he's been reborn as the Demon King's son, a baby of the demon race. Suddenly, he gets excited, knowing his destiny has just been jump-started. While fantasizing about thoughts of clapping his new father, Jilbages checks out his new demon race body and decides to destroy the rest of the demon race with his hands to avenge the humans. Afterward, Sophia searches the castle for Jilbages and calls out to him to tell him it's time to study. Meanwhile, Jilbages hides in a corner nearby and thinks he'd rather spend his time investigating the castle for some information than studying. While Sophia curses him under her breath, Jilbages wonders if he can figure out the weaknesses of the demons. His life as the hero Alexander ended in his face-off with Golgiz. Now, he's the demon prince Jilbages. Owing to the variation in growth speed from race to race, Jilbages is 2 years old but has the physique of a human 5-year-old. Knowing this pisses him off since the fast growth is an advantage to the demons. Although he's now a demon too, Jilbages curses the demon race and decides never to forgive them. Right after his birth, Jilbages' life was nothing but a sleep-wake-eat cycle, which almost bored him to death. However, those days are gone now, and he's finally grown enough to walk around with his goal to delete the Demon King. So he decides to devote his time to gathering information about the Demon King's castle. He then recalls that the war where he lost his life was still going on, and the human alliance was still on the losing end. While he plays Sherlock Holmes around the castle, he realizes that whatever information he gathers about the demon race would be useless since it'd be difficult to get in touch with the Panhuman Alliance in his demon body. While he tries to figure out what to do, he recalls he still has 13 years ahead of him to fully grow into an adult demon. So he figures that's enough time for him to quickly gain power to snuff out the Demon King. Suddenly, Sophia appears behind him and grabs him. While he freaks out, she picks him up and reminds him that he has to study. However, Jilbages protests and says he wants to investigate the castle, but Sophia doesn't allow him. A few moments later, Jilbages grumpily sits and waits for his devilish tutor to hand him his books. Sophia is actually part of the devil race, and his mother has made a contract with her because she's the head of education. The devils of knowledge obtain knowledge to grow and rise in ranking, so Sophia is literally a walking encyclopedia. Meanwhile, Jilbages protests against the idea of learning to become a demon king, since all he wants to do is clobber him to death. However, Sophia tells him to get ready to be drowned in a world of reading, writing, and calculating. When Jilbages refuses to listen, Sophia calls out to Platy, his mother, and expresses her frustration. Just then, Platy arrives and has him put in a seat of reflection, an equivalent of the iron chair from medieval times. While Jilbages hates Sophia for being a tattletale, Patty tells him to get himself together. Considering the pain in his butt, Jilbages agrees with his mom, who then tells him that Riojas, the first prince, learned to read, write, and calculate at age 3. Now, because his mother won't stop bragging about it all day long, Platy tells Jilbages that he has to do better than him and become the Demon King. However, Jilbages won't change his mind about sending the Demon King on a permanent vacation, so his mother decides to let him do whatever he wants if he can win a fight against Sophia. While they are both surprised to hear this, Platy tells Sophia to give him a few bruises to avoid sending her son to the hospital. Unsure of the outcome of what's about to happen, Jilbages reassures himself that he's a demon prince and wonders if Sophia could really throw a punch. Just then, Sophia brags about her ability to replicate any move perfectly from hand-to-hand combat to spearmanship. So she adjusts the spectacles and wonders if it's okay to give the young master some thrashing. Meanwhile, Jilbages relaxes, thinking Sophia is a mediocre devil. Suddenly, Sophia dashes towards Jilbages, but he stops her attack by grabbing her fist and dodging a flurry of her other attacks. In retaliation, Jilbages throws a punch which almost crushes Sophia's spectacles, but she dodges the punch and jumps back. After this, Jilbages stands like he's in a ring with Mike Tyson. Surprised by this, Sophia commends his fighting but asks about where he learned his moves. Just then, he realizes his cover was blown since a 2-year-old shouldn't move like that. However, he lied by saying he saw the moves at the military training ground. Suddenly, Sophia replicates his moves and points out that such martial arts movement doesn't exist for the demon race. Shocked to hear this, Jilbages realizes that he used the martial arts he had learned as a human. Fortunately for him, Platy tells Sophia that not everyone can replicate moves like she does. Facing Jilbages, Platy tells him to fight like a demon and cease using a fighting style unbefitting for the proud demon race. Just then, they resume the duel, and while Sophia charges at Jilbages, he figures his secret might be discovered if he keeps fighting like a human. Furthermore, showing human moves to Sophia would be disastrous for the human race, So while he contemplated what to do, Julbejas suddenly feels hit with a three-piece combo, leaving his face like plastic surgery gone wrong. Meanwhile, Sophia taunts him and reminds him about the implications of his loss. Just then, she puts some sheets before him and Julbejas decides to show them he's got more than cheese for brains. To his dismay, the sheet was full of demon race alphabets, making him freak out wondering what the hieroglyphics meant. While Sophia explains what the symbols are, Julbejas then flashes back to his previous life when his father tried to make him learn. Because of the nightmare he's about to be put through, Julbejas decides never to forgive the demons. The night when his village was attacked, Julbejas' mother took him to the next town and entrusted him to the church there. Unfortunately, she died shortly after from the poisoned arrows of the elves. Julbejas heard about his mother's death later and discovered he was the only survivor from his village, so he had tearfully vowed at his mother's grave to slaughter the Demon King's army. So he volunteered to join the military and underwent extensive training. After this, he was sent to the Holy Church, where he obtained the holy element required as an adult. One day after pushing himself to the limits, Julbejas gets notified that his country has fallen. Hearing this, Julbejas breaks down and loses it. The final fortress had been taken by the Demon King's army. Just when he realizes he has not taken back the land that harbors his people's bodies, he decides he won't let his final chance slip through. Julbejas suddenly awakes from his sleep, grabbing his head and feeling a wet sensation. When he checks his hands, he discovers he's bleeding and goes crazy when he finds out his pillows are soaked in blood. Just then, he hears a knock on his door and Sophia opens the door. Julbejas was surprised to see her since she was exuding an energetic aura. Just then she asks if he can see, so she congratulates him on his first sign of puberty. She then announces that she will no longer call him young master. When Platy hears of the recent developments with her son, she is impressed that Julbejas is the first of his kind to grow horns at just 5 years old. While she laughs hysterically in excitement, Julbejas wonders if he looks that hilarious. It's been 3 years since Julbejas felt nostalgic about his dead family and friends from his previous life. Now, he's a proper demon, but he can't help but feel disgusted with his new life. While he still throws internal tantrums, desperate to cling to his old life as Julbejas the hero, he knows he can't since he's now a 5-year-old demon. His plans to exterminate the Demon King still seemed like an itch he couldn't reach just yet since he'd not even seen the Demon King anywhere around. Just then, he realizes he has not obtained any significant information and decides to keep searching no matter what. While his soul remains the same, his body has fully transformed into that of the demon race, and while the servants congratulate him on reaching puberty, Julbejas figures that since his birth, his only progress is his development of an ability to perceive the mana of the people around him. He observes the imp, a small messenger who has become familiar with it, and concludes it is a demon in compact form. On the other hand, the beastman who is more reliable has physical abilities that are quite exceptional. Finally, the third person who reminds him of his mother's death congratulates him. Meanwhile, after assessing her, he discovers that night elves seem weak and are just as good as the imps. Originally, the night elves originated from the elves, a race who loved the forest and worshipped spirits. However, there was a war between both tribes due to their differences in natural doctrine. After the night elves were driven out of the forest, they lost the majority of their mana and longevity, so they offered their blood to an evil god to gain power to exact revenge against the forest elves. Because of this, they submit to the demon race and become a part of the Dark Clan. Meanwhile, on the outlook, they are a part of the demon race and were treated well. However, they are scorned as hornless behind their backs. Because of their lack of horns, the night elves possess a feeble amount of mana and are regarded as a pitiful race. In the Dark Clan, horns represent magic power. So while the elf congratulates Julbejas, he figures the night elves will never get along with the Demon King's army. Meanwhile, Platy keeps making a big deal out of Julbejas being an early bloomer, so he checks out her mana and figures she's pretty strong since her mana converges inwards like a rock when compared to Sophia's, which flowed like a wind at the ends. Just then, Platy clears her throat and congratulates Julbejas again. She then adds that he can now protect his own body, so he's allowed to enter another section of the castle. When Julbejas asks to know what she meant, Platy laughs and suddenly compels every one of the servants in the room to kneel. Shocked by this, Julbejas feels the pressure too and wonders how she could pull that off. After this, Platy asks if he understands now and Julbejas says he does. From Platy's demonstration, he learned he could use his mana to one-sidedly interfere with his opponent. Just then, he realizes why he never could resist whatever she tells him to do. She then says that he could probably visit the place without being destroyed and tells him to look forward to meeting the Demon King. While his soul cringes at the thought of that, he fakes a smile and agrees with Platy. Shortly after this, along some corridor in the castle, Jilbages gets excited because he's finally getting an opportunity to exact his revenge on the Demon King. While fantasizing about 1,000 ways to clap the Demon King, Jilbages looks at his hands and wonders if he actually stands a chance against the Demon King when he has only feeble hands and no swords. A few days later, Sophia apologizes for keeping Jilbages waiting and asks if he's ready. In response, Jilbages stares at her silently wondering what devilish plan she's got up her sleeve. Suddenly, she pulls out a book and announces that it's time to resume his studies. Disappointed by this, Jilbages questions Sophia on why he can't meet the Demon King yet. In response, she tells him that he needs more time before he can get an audience with the Demo King. She then adds that the paperwork to make that happen is in disorder since he also rose in ranking. Since Jilbages grew horns, he has gained the noble title of Exwire, a junior knight. This surprises him when he learns that all demons without exception get to live in their own white houses. Just then, Jilbages figures he's at a stalemate again. Meanwhile, Sophia lectures him on the ranking systems in the Dark Clan. Then Jilbages learns that he has to ascend the ranking pyramid by obtaining merit from war. Anyone could receive a promotion, and so whoever reaches the very top becomes the Demon King. After her explanation, Jilbages points out that the system has been rigged to make it complicated for anyone to aim for the Demon King's position. However, Sophia explains that the system was designed to rely on pure strength rather than the importance of blood connection to become the Demon King. She then adds that things won't work because the demons with strong egos would never submit to anyone, and according to the contract with the evil god known as Carnival, no one can use the Soul Eater that dwells in the Demon King's lands. She further explains that one of the reasons why the Pan-Human Alliance failed to overturn the flow of the war was because of the Demon King's Soul Eater, and those who stood against the Demon King lost their lives. Because of this, their souls were stolen and became part of the Demon King's strength. In this way, the Demon King became fearsome and drove back to the front lines. Just then, Jilbages discovers that the source of the Demon King's incredible strength is not from the king himself, but from the lands. When Jilbages asks about the lance, Sophia explains that the first-generation Demon King called Lodges created the lance at the cost of his own life. So Jilbages asks Sophia about what would happen if the lance was destroyed or lost. In response, Sophia says there's nothing in the world that can destroy the demonic lance, and it's unlikely to happen since the Demon King takes it everywhere with him. After Jilbages' persistent questioning, Sophia explains that the demon race will probably lose its unity if the Demon King loses his terrifying strength. When he hears this, Jilbages gets lost in thought, but Sophia calls him when she suddenly rushes towards him asking if he finally has a desire for knowledge. Immediately, she says there's a book that goes into detail about his questions and pulls her shirt apart, exposing her miniature milk jugs. Just then, Jilbages looks at her and forces his eyes to stay in their sockets. Just then, Sophia reaches into her chest and pulls out a book. After this, she brags about being a walking library and explains that the book discusses the foundation of the kingdom and was written by the first Demon King. While she reads out the book's title, she hands it over to Jilbages, who then reads it slowly too. After this, Jilbages recalls that the human race knew very little about the demon race during the war, so he wonders if he'll understand things better after reading the book. After learning about the Demon King's lance and the secret behind the demon's strength, Jilbages opens the books wondering why the demons invaded the human race in the first place. So he begins reading and finds out that the demon race used to be a savage race who were nothing special despite being blessed with abilities. Surprised by this information, Jilbages recalls that he learned about the super pride of demons when he became one and wonders why Rayujas speaks ill of his own race. Just then, Sophia asks why he's surprised and chips in that Rayujas was eccentric for a demon. After this, Jilbages continues his reading and finds out that the demons lived like savages in the past, and the only thing they did apart from hunting was patrol and fight over small sacred hunting grounds within the tribes. Rayujas was once a man born with great strength from the demon race. He lived on a small piece of land surrounded by mountains, so he grew powerful to the point where he was considered to be the next tribe leader. Meanwhile, the members of his tribe fought each other over small, narrow hunting grounds, which made him fed up. So one day, after slaughtering dozens of his fellow demons, he spotted some birds flying and got curious about where they came from and returned to. This suddenly lit a curiosity about the outside world in him. However, when he tried asking them about the other side of the mountains from the villagers, none of them could give him an answer since their IQ was measured in slices of fishes and meats. So the skirmishes never ended. After a while, Ryuja's curiosity turned into an impulse that couldn't be described with words, so eventually, he left his homeland. After days of journeying, Ryuja crossed the steep and snow-covered mountain ranges where he lit fires and hunt games to stay alive. Out of his desperation, Ryuja finally arrived at the summit and saw the ever-expanding Greenland over the horizon. There he discovers the great civilization built by the natives, some of which were hostile and others friendly. After a while, he learned to write and adapted to the culture. He was amazed when he saw a dwarf blacksmith. He also met an oddball from the elven race who then traveled with him from that day. With his perspective broadened by the journey, Ryuja remembers how uncivilized his tribesmen were, fighting over a small piece of land, and he figures that the carnage will continue as long as they don't learn about life on the other side of the mountain. So he is determined to break his people free from being barbarians and embrace the light of civilization. However, he also figures that an ordinary demon like himself couldn't achieve this, so he thinks of seeking the overwhelming strength necessary to unite the demon race as one. In search of power, Ryuja continued his journey and arrived at a desolate frontier where he found a dark portal connecting to the world where the devils reside. On arrival, he received a passionate welcome and was engaged in an endless battle where blood was spilled. Just then, the battle called forth a mighty devil who was impressed with Ryuja's valor. The devil god, called Cannibal, calls out to Ryuja and decides to grant him the ability to devour souls and turn it into his power. In return, Loglias would entertain the cannibal with his way of life. Just then, Cannibal invites Ryuja and they seal a contract. When he came out of the dark portal, Ryuja devoured everything on his way to his homeland. Starting with the human kingdom, Ryuja dominated every race and offered part of the strength he obtained to Cannibal through the dark portal. Finally, when he became a king, he tried to unite the demons and charged them never to underestimate their enemies. While he continues reading, Jilbajas reads about Ryuja's commands to invade and dominate the enemy instead of fighting between fellow brethren. In the end, Ryuja explains that his instructions are the only way to prevent the demon race from returning to the Stone Age. Just then, Jilbajas closes the book and figures that the demon race has to keep making enemies to keep their unity. With an evil look, Jilbajas thinks the demon race deserves to be allowed to wipe itself out for attacking his people and destroying his homeland. Just then, Sophia asks for his reviews on the book and adds that the book helps to understand the thoughts of the first demon king. In a sarcastic response, Jilbajas says his soul was shaken by the book, and with a fake smile, he adds that it was very informative. However, Jilbajas thinks it was truly informative, and regardless of his internal rage, he is glad to have read the book because he now knows that there is hope for humanity while he waits to grow. Because of the Demon King's tricks, his army constantly gained on the humans. However, the invasion has become slower over the years, and the Pan-Human Alliance had to hold several military meetings for it. Thinking about what he'd read, Jilbajas thinks the Demon King's army runs a risk of a civil war after the invasion. So he considers how much time he's got and thinks about the existence of the Dark Portal and its importance to the Demon King's army. After Jilbajas asks Sophia about it, she explains that she came from the Dark Portal, which was originally led nowhere. She then adds that devils like herself can only come to the world when accompanied by demons. Hearing this, Jilbajas decides that he has to drive a wedge into the frail unity of the demon race by destroying the Lance and the Dark Portal. By doing this, he hopes the Pan-Human Alliance will have a chance of winning. Although Jilbajas has no idea how to achieve that, he decides to make it happen at all costs. After this, Jilbajas thinks about Ryuja's ideas and vows to ruin every one of his hopes for the demon race. So he fantasizes about his plans to degrade and destroy the kingdom of the Demon King and write an autobiography when he's done. While he decides on a title for his autobiography, Sophia announces that it'll soon be time for him to enter the devil world. Sophia then expresses her excitement as his teacher, while he wonders what she's talking about. Just then, Sophia explains to him that with his early horn growth and strong magic power, he stands a chance to break the first prince's record by visiting the devil world and making a contract with a devil. Just then, Sophia says she guesses Platy is considering it too. while Jilbages flashes back to Platy telling him not to lose to the first prince. After this, Sophia says she wonders what devil Jilbages will make a contract with. When she adds that she looks forward to it, Jilbages questions the idea of a former hero making a contract with the devil. However, he figures it doesn't matter, as long as he gets to defeat the Demon King and destroy his kingdom. The next day, in a meeting with Jilbages, Platy commands him to go to the devil world and adds that he must find a befitting devil for himself. Meanwhile, somewhere in the devil world, Aunt Indix's voice echoes along the corridors of her home when she says she's free and bored while lying lazily on her throne. On the balcony of the Demon King's castle, Platy stretches her body and comments on the good weather. Just then, she announced that they arrived early and added that it was a good day for a flight while Jilbages quietly listened. However, Jilbages worries about what lies ahead and wonders why Platy says they're early when the sun is about to set. Just then, he recalls that the demon race's idea of being early is the same as mid-afternoon in his previous life, since there is a difference in time perception between the human and demon race. Just then, he flashes back to the past 5 years of his demonic existence and recalls how confused he had been when he was introduced to the time system. It was his first time outside of the Demon King's castle after being reborn, so while they stood, they heard some flapping sounds. Just then, Platy announces that their Uber just arrived, so Jilbages looks up and spots a beast flying in the sky. While he wonders if it's a dragon, the beast suddenly lands and he discovers it's a wyvern instead. After the wyvern settles, Platy approaches it while Jilbages marvels at the fact that a beast from the dragon race could lay its head on the ground. While they approach the wyvern, Platy reassures Jilbages that he's going to learn how pleasant a flight is, since it's his first time riding a wyvern. Meanwhile, Jilbages had learned that the dragon race is a very prideful race among the demons. He then wonders why such a beast would be willing to be treated as a mount. Under the Demon King's castle, there is a dragon egg hatchery. The dragon race had pleaded with the first Demon King after their defeat, but the demon race wasn't satisfied, so they took control of the hatcheries and kept the dragon's eggs in cages as hostages. Although the mountain range originally belonged to the dragon race, they lost it to the demon race after their defeat and became slaves to prevent the demons from making dragon omelets. Just then, Jilbages discovers that the dragon race was compelled to be loyal only because they couldn't resist the demon race. On moving closer to the wyvern, Jilbages hears it growl and wonders if the beast is discontent with its life. After this, Jilbages wonders if the Pan-Human Alliance could take advantage of the dragon race's ability to conquer the sky if they had something equivalent to those hostages. After this, Jilbages follows Platy since he can't figure out his entire plan yet. While Platy mounts the wyvern, Uriel, the mother of the first prince, arrives to send them off. Just then, Platy expresses her surprise to see Uriel, but Uriel has other plans. So she announces that she wants to say hello to Jilbages since he might be her last and only chance to do so. Facing Jilbages, Uriel begins to interfere with his magic power, making Jilbages wonder if she's fishing for a fight. While Jilbages wonders about who she is, he figures she must be a consort too, just like his mother, and tries to figure out an appropriate response. After this, Jilbages decides to respond with equal force and counters her magical power. Sensing this, Uriel scoffs and backs off. So she faces Platy and says it's too cruel to Jilbages to the devil world since he's still very young. In response, Platy says she knows what's best for her son and asks if it's cruel only because it is another consort's son. Pissed off by her comments, Uriel glances at Jilbages and moves closer to tell him that she hopes he makes it back home in one piece. After Uriel leaves, Jilbages asks his mom about Uriel, and she explains that she's the mother of Ioges, the first prince. Just then, Platy calls her a depressing woman for always wanting to be the best at everything. When Jilbages asks about her intentions for coming to see them, Platy explains that Uriel was trying to scare him before his departure. She then adds that the spirit of a person is deeply reflected in the devil world, and such a person could lose their way back if they enter the world with anxiety. After this, Platy brags about her son being different from weaklings and tells Jilbages that he's different and strong. While she cooks up a plan to show off her powerful son and make him king, Jilbages worries about what awaits him in the devil world, but he brushes it off since nothing could be as worse as his attempt to defeat the Demon King. Just then, Platy offers Jilbages a hand and pulls him up on the wyvern. Suddenly, she lifts him from behind her and makes him sit in front, making Jilbages freak out. Just then, she announces their departure while Jilbages wonders why she won't let him sit behind. Platy then commands the wyvern to take them to the dark portal. Meanwhile, Jilbages gets pissed for missing his only chance to savor Platy's nice scent from behind. During the flight, Platy asks Jilbages about how he feels flying for the first time. In response, Jilbages says he's comfortable. Just then, Platy pats his head while he wishes he could tell her to stop patting a 30-year-old man on the head. After this, Jilbages flashes back to his past life when he encountered a proud white dragon who refused to allow him to put a saddle on it. He then freaked out when he heard that, wondering how dragons are ridden. However, one of his comrades showed up with a rope which they tied to the dragon and held throughout the ride. While Jilbages thinks of a response to Platy's question, he figures the flight on the white dragon was rough and concludes that wyverns are just better at flying. So he tells Platy that he feels calm and enjoys the flight because the wyvern is not shaking as much as he expected. Impressed by his response, Platy resumes patting his head, creeping Jilbages out. During the flight, Jilbages looks down and spots some circular wooden structures on land once occupied by the Beastman Kingdom. Looking closer, he spots some humans who look like slaves. The territory now belongs to the demon race, and the only few demons he sees are the feudal lords. So, Jilbages figures that must be how the demon race manages territories gained from wars. A few moments later, they arrive at their destination and jump off the wyvern. Just then, Platy announces that the dark portal is further ahead, surprising Jilbages that such a portal is located in the middle of a city full of haunted buildings. Platy then explains that the city is called the Cosmolodge, a city made for the devils and demons where they get their bodies used to the world. She then adds that it's also a waiting room for the relatives of demons who enter the devil world. Shortly after this, they arrive at the dark portal and Jilbages rubs his eyes thinking there's a dark spot in his eyes. However, he soon realizes that it's the dark portal looking like a droplet of ink splattered on a scenery painting. His imagination of the dark portal was more good-looking than what now stands before his eyes, so he trembles and asks Platy if the devil world is really on the other side. After this, he walks toward the portal and asks Platy to follow him. However, she says she's not going with him. Surprised, Jilbages gives her a questioning look, and she explains that she can't go into the devil world because she has received too many devils in her soul and might not be able to return if she goes in. So she said she'll have to wait in the Cosmolodge for his return. When Platy tries to give him a beginner's advice, Jilbages cuts her off and heads toward the portal. However, Platy tells him to hold on and says she's impressed that he's calm despite visiting the devil world for the first time. She then explains that there are people who form a contract with an imp for starters, and there are also those who form a contract with an archdemon right off the bat. After this, she adds that without searching for them, he'll certainly meet the one he needs the most. In response, Jilbages says he's got it and heads into the portal, while Platy watches him disappear into the darkness. On entering the dark portal, Jilbages is surprised by the overwhelming darkness and floating feeling he has, like he'd drunk a strong wine. While he floats, he tries to figure out what identity would suit his journey and then decides that he's Jilbages. Suddenly, he lands in the devil world and observes the thick foliage surrounding him. When Jilbages looks up to the sky, he finds a dark sun in the crimson sky with a dark black light. While he takes in his new environment, he discovers that the forest looks simple, yet it's not like anything he's ever seen. Just then, Jilbages feels himself getting smaller and smaller, so he gets anxious. Suddenly, someone says hello to him and he turns to check out who it is. Surprised to see a dressed-up question mark, Jilbages wonders why a cane is wearing a tailcoat. So he responds and asks the cane about its identity. In response, the character takes off his hat and introduces himself as Otigos, the Devil of Guidance. Impressed by Otigos' gentlemanly gestures, Jilbages says it's a pleasure to meet him and almost introduces himself as Alex. Just then, he corrects himself and introduces himself as Jilbages the Demon Prince. After this, Jilbages beats himself up for getting carried away by Otigos' appearance, and wonders if he's the demon that he needs most. When he tries to check out Otigos' magic power, but discovers he cannot get any information about it. So he stands cluelessly in the dark trying to use sound reflection to navigate through it. However, to his dismay, the sound is being reflected back to him in an explosive manner from all directions. He could sense the trees and the ground, but not Otigos' magical power, so he concludes his magic must be stronger than anything. Just then, Otigo points out that Jilbages is an unusual visitor. He then adds that it is his duty to guide visitors to where they need to be, regardless of who they are. So he reaches out to Jilbages and says he'll show him the way. After this, Otigos announces that the path shall be revealed, so he falls to the ground and rises back up. After dusting off himself, Otigos directs Jilbages toward a direction. Unimpressed by Otigos' performance, Jilbages asks if that's really the way, and Otigos prides himself as the devil of guidance and reassures him that he can't be mistaken. When Jilbages checks out the path, he asks Otigos about what kind of devil awaits him. In response, Otigos says he doesn't know since foretelling things is not in the range of his authority. After this, Jilbages bids Otigos farewell and thanks him as he leaves. In response, Otigos asks him about his goal and tells him to keep that in mind as he continues on his journey. While he walks through the forest, Jilbages thinks about his goal and recalls that he has decided that his only goal is to get power to defeat the Demon King and destroy the Demon Kingdom. Suddenly, Jilbages feels himself speeding up and the scenery begins to change around him. In a moment, he journeys through the mountains, rivers, caves, deserts, and sees to the west where the Devil World started, a place where the dark sun rises. So he arrives at a large building and stops. Just then, the doors open and Jilbages figures that must be an invitation, so he walks in and the doors shut. On entering the building, he discovers it's an ancient stone-made palace that is decaying and is empty except for stone monuments which are like gravestones. After this, he finds a huge door and opens it. However, he finds another door in the room and opens it too. To his dismay, he gets stuck in a loop of the same event repeating itself. He suddenly expressed his frustration and pushed open the door one last time. Just then, he enters a different scenery. Suddenly, he heard a voice and looked towards the throne in the room. There he finds Ntr'd, who is too small to be called a woman, but can neither be called a child since she's quite bewitching. So he stared intensely at her, but couldn't grasp the shape and power of her magic. Meanwhile, Ntr'd stares at him while he wonders if she's the befitting devil for him. Just then, Ntr'd asks why a human stands in her palace. In response, Jilbages asks her what she means and Ntr'd laughs hysterically. Clueless as to what's funny about his look, Jilbages stares at her confused while she says it's plain obvious and points to Jilbages. Suddenly a mirror appears from nowhere and Jilbages sees his true self in the mirror. Suddenly, his body is transformed into Alexander's, so Ntr'd asks for his name and Jilbages looks back, but can't find the door anymore. Just then Ntr'd floats towards him and asks if he is planning to escape. When Jilbages refuses to respond, Ntr'd binds him with a silence taboo spell. Suddenly, Jilbages unconsciously introduces himself as Alexander, the hero of the human race. While his mouth keeps moving on autopilot, he reveals how was reborn as a prince of the demon race after being defeated by the Demon King. To stop himself, he suddenly sticks his hands in his mouth, yet his mouth doesn't stop. Meanwhile, Ntr'd says it's her first time seeing a reincarnator with an intact self, so she twirls around Jilbages asking him why he wasn't devoured by cannibal's corpse. While Jilbages desperately struggles to keep himself from talking, Ntr'd makes jest of him and says the human race should never be underestimated. After this, she asks Jilbages about his purpose for coming to the Devil World. When he refuses to speak, Ntr'd smiles and binds him with an obstruction taboo spell, so he can't stop himself from speaking. Immediately, Jilbages reveals that he entered the Devil World to look for strength in order to defeat the Demon King. When Ntr'd states the obvious, Jilbages explains that for the past 5 years of his life, he has endured the company of the enemies who destroyed his hometown and eaten the cooking of the race who took his mother from him. Jilbages then thinks of how long he has hidden the truth, hoping for a chance of victory. However, now that Ntr'd has exposed his secret, Jilbages loses all hope. So, he asks Ntr'd about who she is and she introduces herself as the devil god of taboo. When Jilbages hears this, he recalls from the book he's read that the first Demon King formed a contract with the cannibal, the devil god of predation. He had asked Sophia if devil gods and devils were relatives, or if one was superior to the other. When Sophia heard this, she went into space for a bit and suddenly overreacted. When Jilbages asks her why she's laughing, Sophia accuses him of blasphemy. Just then she explains that it's blasphemous to call god devils relatives of normal devils since they're superior compared to them. She then explains that god devils are terrifying beings that transcend the pinnacle of power with many devils under their reign. After his trip down memory lane, Jilbages wonders if Ntr'd is really a god devil. Then he realizes what he's up against since god devils are more troublesome and vicious compared to normal devils. So he gets troubled because she can see through him completely. Just then, Ntr'd smacks her lips and wonders what to do with him. When she considers his situation, she decides that it is a big deal. So she threatens to expose Jilbeja's secret to the demons. In response, Jilbeja begs her while thinking of a way to get himself out of the quagmire situation. After this, Ntr'd casually says she's obligated to cooperate with the demons as much as possible, due to the agreement made by Cannibal. Just then, Jilbeja tries to fiddle with her brain by asking why a demon god who rules the devil world pays attention to the demons. In response, Ntr'd reveals that the god devils only respect the agreement because the demons came to them to beg for strength. In addition to this, she explains that the devil world is now more lively than ever because of the power that flows into it, so it's her duty as a ruler to ensure a bountiful territory. While still bowed before her, Jilbeja senses that Ntr'd could use a little bit of fun, so he suggests that he cooks up something more interesting than being exposed to the demons. Just then, Ntr'd tells him not to bother suggesting a contract since it's boring and cliché. Hearing this, Jilbeja asks her what kind of contractor she prefers. In response, Ntr'd explains that she prefers one who breaks grand-scale taboos and not half-baked ones. Hearing this, Jilbeja pitches himself as the best taboo breaker in the world. To further drive home his point, Jilbeja explains that he is the hero who fights the Dark Clan to protect humanity, and says he will have to abandon innocent people to secure his position as the Demon Prince. To make himself sound more evil, Jilbeja vows to use the people he's trying to protect as stepping stones and cutting them off for the end goal. He has been thinking about it for a long time, and now it's inevitable. So he claims to be the Demon Prince who should inherit the Demon King's will and dedicate himself to the kingdom. However, he vows to bring destruction. As he approaches Ntr'd, Jilbeja makes an endless list of all the atrocities that he would commit just to make her ascend the heights of pleasure. Surprised at how evil his decisions were, Jilbeja realizes that a part of him has grown feelings for the members of the demon, including his servants, Sophia and Platy. Regardless of this, he decides to send them all to the afterlife. While making his case before Ntr'd, Jilbeja vows to wreak havoc as a humanity hero and as a demon prince. While he watches him, Jilbeja asks if there's any contractor more befitting than himself. In response, Ntr'd admits that he's indeed one of a kind. However, Ntr'd says it's not enough to convince her, so she demands a price that can measure up. After this, she explains that the two ways to make a contract with a devil are to either offer his magic power to the devil or offer something equivalent to the devil. She then adds that she doesn't want his power as an offering or something pitiful like his soul, since she's not as shallow as Cannibal. Instead, she asks him to try to convince her with something more charming. Hearing this, Jilbeja offers to destroy the dark portal, surprising Ntr'd. When he explains that he'll certainly do that to deplete the demon race's power and destroy the kingdom. Ntr'd gives him a smug look and tells him to skip to the good part. At this point, Jilbeja grabs Ntr'd by the shoulders and locks eyes with her to convince her by explaining the implications of destroying the dark portal. After this, Jilbeja whispers to her ears that it's an opportunity, stunning Ntr'd, who then screams that it's a bad idea since the livelihood of the devil world depends on it. She then adds that she can't break the agreement made with the demons by sending the cute baby devils into despair, since it would ruin her reputation. Suddenly, Ntr'd makes happy noises from his grip and tries pulling him closer. Stunned by this, Jilbeja puts some distance between them and figures he's also dealing with a cultured god devil. Overwhelmed by the afterglow of the Jilbeja's effect, Ntr'd agrees to seal a contract since he's shown how resourceful he can be. She then adds that she'll keep his secret from the demon race since he's no good to her dead. After this, Ntr'd points out that it's impressive that he didn't forget his hatred for the demon race, even though his soul was tattered and reborn into a new body. When she asks if Jilbeja still has memories of his previous life, he responds, saying he does. However, when she asks him specific questions about his past life, Jilbeja realizes that his memory isn't as good as he thought it was. Although he remembers a few faces and Claire's name, he doesn't remember anything else. When Ntr'd asks about his mentors, Jilbeja tries hard to remember everyone who he has called mentors, but only remembers one name. Just when he feels like there are maggots gnawing at his memories, Jilbeja turns to the mirror and Ntr'd shows him what his tattered soul looks like. He had barely escaped being totally devoured by Cannibal's spell because of his tenacious revenge. So because of this, the holes in his memories will never return and will only expand as long as he lives as a demon. Ntr'd then asks if he would like to cancel the contract. She also reassures him that the secret about his identity is safe with her if he chooses to continue his life as a demon. In response, Jilbages says that he remembers the day when his village was burned down as well as his vow to revenge. He then says the contract is good enough for him. Hearing this, Ntr'd gloats down from her throne and approaches him while smacking her lips. So she stretches her hand to seal the contract with a handshake. Suddenly, Jilbages pulls back his hand and tells her to hold on. He then asks if Ntr'd's authority is gaining power by violating taboos. In response, Ntr'd explains that she's the devil god who reigns over taboo in the devil world and in the real world. So, her powers increase when taboos are violated, and her contractor gains more power the more he violates taboos. She then tells Jilbages that he could create his own taboos once he grows accustomed to her power. To demonstrate what she means, Ntr'd binds Jilbages with a blinking taboo, so he tries to close his eyes but can't. She then explains that it is magic that restricts or enforces an action. While Jilbages thinks of how strong the magic is, Ntr'd explains that it might be resisted depending on the opponent's magic power. While still lost in thought, Jilbages' eyes get teary, so he tells Ntr'd to stop the magic since his eyes are drying out. However, Ntr'd decides it is the best time to mess with him. When Jilbages screams at her to stop joking, Ntr'd reveals that she's also affected by the taboo. Just then, Jilbages gets an idea to make breathing a taboo, but realizes they'll both end up dead if he does that. After this, Ntr'd explains that because she's more bound to taboos than anyone else, neither of them can break taboos. So when they decide to proceed with the contract, Jilbages observes that they're talking on better terms than before. However, since she's a devil god, Jilbages knows that her mood might change on a whim, so he decides to obtain her strength before that happens. Suddenly, Ntr'd pulls back her hand and says she needs to make sure of something. Just then she asks him about how much of his vessel he'd like to be filled with her authority. In response, Jilbages says she can fill him as much as she wants since he doesn't have much of a choice. After this, they both shook hands and Ntr'd transferred her power to Jilbages, who then received it. After the contract is formed, Jilbages suddenly feels the power flowing into him. It was too late to back out, so he screamed as though his whole body was set on fire. While this happens, Ntr'd points out that his soul is quite dried out and can take more of her power than she expected. So she fills him more and tells him to rejoice for being the only one to have ever received so much power from a devil god. After this, Ntr'd lets go of his hands while he feels like he's drowning. Just then, he falls to the ground and tries to catch his breath. So Ntr'd says she can't say for sure if he's a human, demon, or devil. Confused by her statement, he takes a look at himself and can't see any changes. So he walks towards the mirror and sees Alexander, the hero of humanity, in his prime form. Shocked to see his new look, he asks if this won't affect his real form, and Ntr'd responds by saying his form will be affected a little. She then adds that it's the norm for a contract with the devil. After this, Ntr'd warns him never to return to the devil world since he might never be able to return. Excited that his mission was accomplished, Jilbages smiles and says it's time to go back. When he heads out, Ntr'd walks alongside him and says it's been so long since she visited the outside world. Hearing this, Jilbages wonders if he heard her right, so he asks if she really said what he heard. In response, Ntr'd says she's coming along with him. Surprised by this, Jilbages reminds her that she has no business in the real world since Cannibal also stayed back in the devil world after his contract with Reborn. However, Ntr'd assures him that it'll be fine, so she feels out his pecs and reveals that she made a place to stay inside him since he couldn't find his way inside her. Suddenly, Ntr'd slips into him like he's some human portal. Jilbages then freaks out, knowing she'll follow him everywhere he goes, so he asks her to get out of him while Ntr'd laughs. Afterward, they arrive at the portal of the devil world and Jilbages tries to catch his breath while complaining about the long distance. His journey had been made easy when he arrived, so he thanked Otigos. Meanwhile, Ntr'd disagrees, saying the distance wasn't much. Just then, Jilbages announces that they're going to the real world where they'll meet Platy. He then explains that the devil god contract must be kept a secret since they can't tell what will happen if the contents of the contract leak out. Just then, Ntr'd explains that the effect of his authority will be weakened unless he uses his contracted name, Alexander, so she suggests that he pretends that he was contracted to a normal devil. After thinking about it, Jilbages decides to pretend that he made a contract with Ntr'd, the devil of restriction. When she hears this, Antindixis throws a tantrum for being degraded like a lowly devil. While she does this, Jilbages tells her not to act like that in front of Platy. Suddenly, he feels his power increase for breaking the taboo of degrading a devil god. After this, Jilbages announces that they're leaving while Antindixis responds by saying she can't wait to see him act like a demon. Just then, Jilbages steps into the dark portal, while Antindixis takes a final look at the world. In the real world, Jilbages covers his face to get used to the sun again. While Antindixis stretches her body, Jilbages swings his arm because his mind and body feel cramped. After this, they both went on to look for Platy. When they check a nearby inn, they find Platy sleeping at a table, so they approach her and Jilbages announces his arrival. Just then, Platy raises her head with a sway and looks dryly at Jilbages. After this, she asks him who he is, and he introduces himself as Jilbages after wondering what happened to his mother. While still staring at him dryly, Platy slams the table and asks him who his devil educator is. In response, Jilbages says it is Sophia. However, Platy asks more questions to be sure he is who he claims to be. After he answers all questions correctly, Jilbages stares at Platy and wonders why she looks shrunken. Just then, she grabs him and asks if it's really him. So Jilbages gasps and explains that he must have had an insane growth spurt. Hearing this, Platy breaks down in tears while Antindixis watches. Later, when they move to the inn, Jilbages hears that the few days he had spent in the devil world were equivalent to half a year in the real world. Normally, he was expected to return after a few hours or days at most. When he didn't return, Platy grew anxious and the mothers of the other princes came to gloat. Because of this, Platy had a mental breakdown and could neither eat nor sleep, so she left the castle for the Cosmolodge and prayed for Jilbages' return for half a year. When they arrive at the inn, it looks like a scene where the son brought home a baddie as his girlfriend. So Jilbages introduces Antindixis as Ntr'd, the devil of restriction. While Antindixis throws a tantrum, he explains that he formed a contract with her. Unimpressed by this, Platy points out that Jilbages' power has become stronger than ever. Just then, she asks if Antindixis is an upper-rank devil. In response, Jilbages says she is. When his mother asks about her authority, Jilbages says he can't go into details due to some restrictions. Just then, Platy commends him for his great achievement on his first time entering the devil world. After this, Platy advises him to find a devil nearby when next he visits the devil world. In response, Jilbages says he can't enter the devil world anymore because his soul's vessel is already full from the contract. Facing Antindixis, Platy screams at her and asks what she's done. Surprised by this, Antindixis asks if something is wrong. So Platy angrily explains that because of her, Jilbages can no longer form contracts with other devils and is stuck with her authority magic. In response, Antindixis says it's too much for a mortal to handle multiple authorities at once, since dipping his hands in multiple contracts will dilute the purity of his power. After this, she comments that Platy is being pathetic. Just then, Platy gets infuriated since the word pathetic triggers the demon race. So Platy says the only ones allowed to use the word are those who have made it big. Aching for some drama, Antindixis challenges Platy to play Who's Got Bigger Balls. So Platy reaches for her spear and hurls it at Antindixis. Suddenly, Antindixis prohibits her spearmanship, and the spear stops mid-air, surprising Platy. Desperate to impale Antindixis, Platy forces her spear through the chain. However, Antindixis prohibits her resistance too. However, when Antindixis taunts Platy, she gets furious, breaks through the chains, and hurls her spear at Antindixis. Just then, Antindixis dodges the flying spear and insinuates that she isn't impressed. Meanwhile, Jilbages notes her use of prohibition instead of taboo. After this, Platy acknowledges Antindixis' strength, while Antindixis vows to make Jilbages a splendid demon king. When Platy hears this, she commends Jilbages for scoring himself a great devil. Before he can narrate his difficult ordeal in the devil world, Platy announces that they have to return to the Demon King's castle as soon as possible. When Jilbages wonders why the rush, Platy explains that he's fallen off the grid for half a year and was almost declared dead, surprising Jilbages. After this, Platy reveals that he'll soon be officially declared dead if they don't return to the castle. So they get on the Wyvern and head for the Demon King's castle in haste. During the flight, Platy falls asleep in Jilbages' arms, so he calls out to Auntie and reminds her that his only reason for forming a contract with her is to defeat the Demon King and not to become him. In response, she asks him if it's not the same. She then explains that when he defeats the Demon King and wipes out his siblings, he'll automatically become the Demon King. So she tells him that it will happen whether he wants it or not. Meanwhile, for the first time, Jilbejas wonders what will happen to him after destroying the Demon Kingdom. Shortly after this, they arrive at the Demon King castle and Platy says she'll report to the Demon King that Jilbejas survived and returned. While his mother leaves to show off to the other concubines, Jilbejas wonders how she recovered perfectly after taking a nap. So he observes her behind and concludes that she's a warrior. After this, Jilbejas finds his way into the castle and warns Ntr'd to stay out of sight within the castle vicinity to avoid being recognized as a devil god when she meets with other devils in the castle. Hearing this, Ntr'd assures him that she can only be recognized by a fellow devil god like herself. In addition to this, she says there have been curious souls who ventured into the devil god's residence before. However, she could count their number on one hand. Suddenly, Sophia slams the door open and screams his name. She then pauses to take a good look at him and points out that he's grown a lot since he was gone. After this, Sophia asks him why he took so long and if he managed to make a contract with a devil. In response, Jilbejas introduces Sophia to Ntr'd, who suddenly pops out of him to show herself to Sophia. Suddenly, Sophia gets scared stiff and identifies Ntr'd as the god of taboo, surprising the devil god and Jilbejas. After this, Sophia asks why she's there and Ntr'd says that she doesn't remember meeting Sophia before. When Sophia collapses from the shock, Ntr'd crouches near her and asks if they've met. In response, Sophia narrates that she had to learn about fear when she was born, so she sneaked into Ntr'd's residence. Just then, Ntr'd remembers her and asks if she's the little devil from back then. When Jilbejas gets tired of playing the NPC, he asks Ntr'd if she knows Sophia. In response, she explains that Sophia sneaked into her residence as a baby a long time ago. Since Sophia did whatever she wanted back then, Ntr'd taught her what fear was and kicked her out. Surprised to see how big she has grown, Ntr'd rubs her head and asks Jilbejas what the plan is. When Ntr'd suggests that they silence Sophia, Jilbejas thinks about his secret getting leaked, but decides to spare her instead. While Sophia cries her eyes out, Jilbejas explains that things could get worse if he does that to his mother's contracted demon. And more so, Sophia is his head of education, and he still has a lot to learn from her facing Sophia. Ntr'd asks if she could keep their little secret. But Sophia says she can since she's obligated to reveal anything that can be detrimental to her master. In addition to this, Sophia says she understands that Jilbejas plans to keep his contract with the devil god a secret, since it may cause some disputes with the other princes' factions. However, she asks about why he wants to keep it from his mother. While she explains her reasons for being unable to keep their secret from Platy, Ntr'd grips her neck. Meanwhile, Jilbejas wonders how she managed to figure out so much from little hints. While Ntr'd gets excited about the idea of erasing Sophia, Jilbejas tries to figure out a plan but can't. So Ntr'd reveals to Sophia that Jilbejas seduced her with an offer to violate a taboo big enough even for the ruler of the devil world. When she hears this, Sophia wonders what the taboo could be. Just then, Ntr'd asks Sophia if she likes the devil world. When Sophia says she doesn't like it because it is deserted and bears no knowledge, Ntr'd asks if she wants to die in the real world. In response, Sophia says instead of dying she wants more knowledge and to raise her power. After this, Ntr'd leverages Sophia's ambition and suggests that she learn how to serve both Jilbejas and Platy. Suddenly, Ntr'd rises to her feet and tells Jilbejas that the greetings are over. While he wonders what just happened, Ntr'd hops into him and explains that everything can proceed according to plan. However, Sophia continues crying, so Jilbejas asks Ntr'd to explain what happened to him. She then explains that she only revealed the content of the contract is detrimental to the devil world. When Jilbejas asks if she's aware of his plan to destroy the dark portal, Ntr'd says she doesn't know such a specific detail. In addition to this, Ntr'd explains that Sophia tainted her hands with taboo by prioritizing her own interest above everything. So while Jilbejas tries to wrap his head around this, Platy walks in and tells Jilbejas to get ready since it's time to bestow magic upon him. Hearing this, Jilbejas wonders what that means and asks if something happened. In response, Platy explains that the followers of the other princes who witnessed their return made a report that she mistook someone else as a grown-up version of him because she had gone on a trip to Haywire Island. Hearing this, Jilbages wonders why there's trouble everywhere, while his mother informs him that he has to prove that he's not a bastard. She then adds that her clan and the Demon King's clan both have unique magic that has been passed down through generations. Because of this, she informs Jilbages that he will have to learn the Bloodline magic. Exhausted by the drama, Jilbages sighs and points out that he's not even gotten a break since he returned, but he agrees to learn the magic of both demon clans since they will be very useful tools. After this, Platy tells him that he'll have to learn from Sophia. Afterward, Platy mutters some spells, claps her hands, and sets up a sound barrier. Just then, Platy explains that the Ryuju clan specializes in medical treatment, and they are tasked with the duty of treating demons in the Demon Kingdom. After that, she explains that the magic he'll be receiving is healing magic. The healing magic is a miracle that can only be used by the mountain elves and priests, so Jilbages wonders how someone from the Dark Clan could use it. Suddenly, Platy pierces her hand with her spear and stretches the hand to Jilbages. Just then, she reveals that she had different plans, but because of the controversy, she transfers the bloodline magic of the Seihu clan called metaphase. Immediately, the wound on her hand was transferred to Jilbages. Unimpressed by this, Jilbages thinks the healing magic is nothing but a powerful curse that transfers one's injury and illness to another. Just then, Platy explains that magic can only work with someone weaker or someone with a magic connection. While making reference to the death of Ryujas, Platy reveals that he died because no one from the Ryuju clan could interfere when he was defeated by the hero of the human race. She then adds that, if only Ryujas was able to use the metaphase, such tragedy could have been avoided. Meanwhile, Jilbages imagines how fascinating it must feel to transfer all his injuries to an opponent in combat. After this, Platy also tells Jilbages that if his strength is equal with that of his target, he'll have to work around it or make the target themselves accept the metaphase or it won't be effective. Hearing this, Jilbages and his devil sidekick get excited about it, so he asks if he can use the metaphase yet. In response, Platy says he'll have to transfer the injury back to her first, so she asks him to think about the magic connection that exists between them as mother and son. Suddenly, the injury vanishes from Jilbages' hand. The metaphase originated when the ancestor of the Ryuju clan wanted to transfer a wound from her son's body, so the magic was a result of a mother's love. When he hears this, Jilbages marvels at how magic that started with love became refined till it became a splendid curse that could be used even in battles. Platy then explains that the magic is still about love since only her beloved child can inherit it. After this, Platy congratulates Jilbages and tells him that he still needs to learn how to master the metaphase. To celebrate his progress, Platy decides to send over a maid to Jilbages' room the next night so he can do whatever he wants with her. While Jilbages stares blankly, wondering what she means, Platy adds that he needs to learn how to use his subordinates from the maid. On her way out, Platy says that Jilbages will be learning another unique magic in 2 days' time since all the necessary arrangements have been made for him to be taught by the Olgi clan. Finally, she asks him to get some rest because he's had a long day. Later, when Jilbages tiredly crashes into his bed and decides to get some sleep, Ntr'd demands that she explore the Demon King's castle. However, Jilbages shuts her up and says he's exhausted for the day. The next day, while Jilbages is still in bed, someone calls him and tries to wake him up. Just then, he feels a heavy and fluffy sensation above his body. When he opens his eyes, he finds a tiger panting in his face. Freaked out by this, Jilbages screams out loud and Sophia rushes in, asking what happened. A few moments later, Jilbages and Sophia identify the beastmen as Garnia from the White Tiger clan. When she confirms that she's the new maid, Jilbages recalls Platy saying something about that. After this, Jilbages tells Garnia that she scared him while Sophia points out that he screamed out like a girl. Suddenly, Garnia takes a bow and promises to serve him with her life on the line. Just then, Sophia explains that the White Tiger clan is an ethnic minority that swore loyalty to the Ryuju clan since ancient times and has been protected when the humans persecuted them. She then adds that the White Tiger clan is famous for their loyalty. Just then, Garnia says she'd rather cut out her heart than betray her master since her loyalty is her pride. Impressed by this, Jilbages consults Ntr'd, so she explains that the beast men have low magic resistance and are very loyal to their masters, making them a perfect gift for learning the metaphase. Just then, it occurs to Jilbages that Garnia was gifted to him so that she can take his place in case something bad happens. Facing Garnia, Jilbages says it's nice to meet her and promises to show her a good time. While Garnia tells him to wait for his food to be ready, Sophia says she thought it was an assassin sent by Jilbeja's siblings. After this, the room went silent and Jilbejas noticed the awkwardness whenever they were alone. Just then Sophia tells Jilbejas that he'll be studying magic after having his breakfast. Just like old times, Jilbejas discovers Sophia hasn't changed, so he says he'll be in her care. Just in time to ruin the moment, Ntr'd pops out of Jilbeja's belly and mimics him. After this, she requests to listen to the lecture too, while Sophia trembles at the sight of her. When she notices this, Ntr'd tells her to get used to seeing her around. A few moments later, Sophia coughs and begins to lecture about the bloodline magic, which is usually passed down through a clan. When she reveals that only famous clans have bloodline magics, Jilbejas sighs in relief since the world would be in trouble if all demons could use such ridiculous magics. So he asks if everyone from the Reincarnates clan can use the metaphase. In response, Sophia affirms this and explains that it's the reason why the Reincarnates clan is the most influential in the demon kingdom. However, because they failed to treat Raujas, they were put in a bad spot for a while. She then adds that Platy's wedding was postponed repeatedly because of this. However, all Jilbejas could think of was his mother's obsession to make him a demon king. So he asks Sophia about the other bloodline magic, and she explains that the magic from the Oldie clan is known as the Introduction. Surprised by the weird name, Jilbejas asks about it and Sophia says it's a magic that strengthens the user if they introduce themselves before a battle. Just then, Jilbejas flashes back to his battle with the Demon King. When Sophia senses that he's lost in thought, Jilbejas apologizes and lies that he remembered something funny. The next day, Jilbejas visits the training ground and wonders where Platy is. Just then, he spots Platy talking to someone, so he walks up to them and apologizes for keeping them waiting. Suddenly, the old man turns to look at Jilbejas. He then says that Jilbejas is quite a big boy for a 5-year-old. While he wonders who the old fart is, Platy introduces him as Count Oolg, an old army veteran and his tutor for the Oldie clan's bloodline magic. However, all Jilbejas sees is a savage in a noble dress. In response, Jilbejas introduces himself too. After this, they decide to have a demonstration, so Oolg puts some distance between them. Suddenly, he activates the introduction magic by introducing himself, and the soldiers nearby get hit by his magic, so they fall to the ground. Meanwhile, Jilbejas feels it too despite owning a demon's body. Just then, he recalls that the pressure is just the same as it was when he faced the Demon King. Suddenly, Oolg's clothes rip apart due to the pressure, while Jilbejas freaks out. After this, Oolg explains that his clothes are fragile. However, Platy freaks out at this sight of his depressing build, saying the king's clothes are always fine whenever he uses the magic. Meanwhile, Jilbejas imagines himself using the magic and losing his clothes in the process. Just then, Oolg explains that the magic is used by true warriors, so he asks Jilbejas if he is a virgin. While Jilbejas stares confused, Platy responds saying he is, since he'd never gotten to use his spear yet. Just then, Oolg decides to make the day a memorable one for him. After Aulag commands the servants to get prepared, he explains to Jilbejas that he must stay strong at all times as a warrior. While Jilbejas expects a harem of hot chicks, he sees a group of human slaves in chains heading toward him. Shocked by this, he freezes while Oolg explains that they are remnants of the human race who were captured from battles. Just then, Platy hands him a knife and tells him to prove himself a warrior by showing them he's capable of taking lives. Before long, the demons nearby gathered around to watch the virgin graduation ritual. While they cheer him on to slaughter the humans, he remembers who he is and consults Ntr'd, who then reminds him that it is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to gain power. While he tries to figure out what to do, he asks Garniel to release the chains on the slaves. He then commands her not to interfere regardless of what happens later, throwing Garniel into a dilemma. After this, Jilbejas thinks of his desire to protect the humans but chooses not to spare them, because he has to maintain his cover as the Demon Prince, and saving the demon slaves at that time will jeopardize his mission to destroy the Demon Kingdom. Suddenly, he activates the introduction magic and decides to break a taboo. If you made it to the end of this video, confuse the fake fans by commenting Platy is B. If you want to see what happens next, leave a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.